Could you talk about the record at Stewart? There was a report back in May of 2017 by Project South and the Penn State Law Center for Immigrant Rights Clinic, which detailed the testimonies of people who had been detained there. What is that record?
It's a horrible record. You have issues ranging from lack of adequate access to medical care to solitary confinement. People just complaining about their conditions of detainment are placed in solitary. Sometimes we're just talking back to the guards. To the issue of forced labor at this immigration detention center, which, as you mentioned, is operated by one of the richest and the biggest prison corporation in the country. In the past, its revenues have been in the range of $178 million, and yet this prison corporation relies on the forced labor of detained immigrants and pays them between $1 to $4 a day. And it is very much forced labor, even though the government and the corporation claim it's voluntary. We know for a fact that immigrants, including our plaintiff, Shoaib Ahmed, in the class action lawsuit that we currently have pending against CoreCivic, actually complained about not having been paid for a few days. The meager pay that they were supposed to pay him, which was $4 a day, they hadn't paid him for several days, and he said, okay, well, there's not going to be work tomorrow. And so for that, he was placed in solitary confinement for 10 days, where basically he only had an hour to shower every other day, and he was held in a cell for 23 hours a day. We are in touch with him. He has since been deported to Bangladesh, and he still continues to experience trauma from the experience he had at Stewart.
You are one of the most vocal voices around this for-profit private detention center. Can you talk about what you're calling for now, and how has the situation changed under President Trump, Azadeh?
Well, we have called for Stewart to be shut down for about 10 years now, since 2009, when Georgia Detention Watch, a coalition were involved with, put out the first report on the abuse of immigrants. We called for this detention center to be shut down. Our calls repeatedly went ignored. We had another death. Roberto Medina Martinez, a 39-year-old immigrant, died of a treatable heart infection in 2009. Still, the government did nothing. We put out this report, this most recent report, in 2017. ICE, started talking to the media and saying that our report was false, and then people started dying. A few days later, Giancarlo Jimenez Joseph died of suicide after being placed in solitary. And, we've had this really atrocious record of deaths just in the past 2 years, and I think it speaks to the atmosphere of impunity under this administration, where ICE, where CoreCivic employees that run the facility, other entities that might be involved, feel a sense of impunity, that they're not going to be held accountable regardless of how they treat detained immigrants at this isolated facility.